wanted to show you a brand new product today from Natural Pigments called Ceracolors. It is a water-soluble encaustic medium, and I've always enjoyed the encaustic portraits, the Fayum mummy portraits, and wanted to try encaustics, but was a bit intimidated by the idea of having to use a heat plate to mix every color. But with this brand new paint from Natural Pigments, you no longer have to do that. You can simply mix it with water, like watercolor or acrylic, and you can still heat treat it and melt it, but no longer have to heat it in order to work with it. So I'm pretty excited, and I wanted to show you a small painting in progression. Because Ceracolors is a brand new product, I hadn't seen any finished paintings done with it before, so I was pretty curious as to how it reacted straight out of the tube. The paint is really soft, easy to move, mixes very easily, and I was pretty surprised at how just a little bit of water could turn it into a very loose watercolor-like paint, and I could still take a bristle brush to the thicker stuff and apply it with great impasto. What I've got here is the start of my painting. I'm using a natural gesso surface, that's chalk gesso, on a aluminum panel. I think it's Dibond. And if you're using Ceracolors, you want to paint on a natural chalk gesso surface, or what is known as a clay board, or something with an absorbent acrylic gesso, not the regular, but their specialty absorbent gesso, because it does need to be on a solid surface and an absorbent surface. I have started off by doing a drawing and transferring it on here so that I didn't have to have a lot of unnecessary lines on my surface. Ceracolors is best used from light to dark, as you would use watercolor, and that would be very natural for you if you're used to using watercolor. But if, like me, you're used to using oil paint, it's going to take a little getting used to. In oil paint, we usually go from dark to light.
I decided to start this painting very much like a watercolor, with thin washes of color, to try to refine my drawing through exploration of the lights and darks before really building any thickness in the paint. I'm using a limited palette and soft brushes. Really, at this stage, I'm just getting a feel for what the paint wants to do. It flows very easily and dries quickly, allowing you to layer on top of an old brush stroke within seconds. But if I wanted to, I could wet previous brush strokes and wipe them off completely. Here I'm using a squirrel hair brush, and I'm keeping the paint rather thin. Later in the painting, I'll use a variety of brushes, from synthetic sables to stiff bristles, depending on what kind of texture I would like for the paint. You can see how quickly you can layer and build with paint that dries this fast. The white isn't as fully opaque as titanium white might be in oil paint, so for areas that I want to be extremely light and colorful, I'll put brush strokes of pure white down and then apply very thin, watery glazes of color over the top to make sure that it's both light and colorful. After playing around with Ceracolors for a couple of days and creating this painting, I feel like I know the product a lot better, but am still a novice at working with wax. When I first thought about trying out Ceracolors, I imagined painting with a wax-based paint would be like smearing around melted crayons, and it didn't sound very enjoyable to me. But Ceracolors has been nothing but the most pleasant paint to work with. It's fluid and easy to dilute with water or with medium, easy to layer, it dries fast but not too fast. You can scrape into it or pile on texture. You can melt it, which I haven't even played around with yet, and sounds like it would be really exciting. You can leave it matte or buff it to a nice eggshell finish. There's just so much here in this new paint that is exciting for an artist. I'm thrilled to use it, and I really can't wait to make another one, even though I'm just finishing this painting right now. I know that I'm going to be using this paint in many paintings to come because I'm enchanted by it. It's a wonderful medium for creating the art that I want to make in the world. This video is taken a couple hours later, and you can see that I'm really starting to build the paint layers. As I've been working with this for quite a while now, I've found that it is really useful to keep a small water bottle where you can spray down your Ceracolors on your palette with a fine mist every 15 minutes or so to keep the paint moist and workable. I've even taken to integrating a couple of drops of water into each paint pile every few hours, just to ensure that it stays nice and fluid. Otherwise, I'd have to be pushing it around with a thicker bristle brush now. You can really start to see the texture that wax imparts on the paint. It's a very interesting texture that I'm not used to seeing, and I really like it. After working on this painting off and on for a couple of days, I finally finished it, and it's time for me to do the final heat treatment to fuse the layers of wax together and set the painting for good. I'm using a home hair dryer, but it's probably preferable to use a heat gun. They're not that expensive, and I'm going to pick one up this week so I can really start to play with melting the wax. The company recommends that you heat set it every few layers and when you're finished with the painting. Now that I'm done heat setting the final painting, I wanted to give you a closer look at the texture on this little painting. It's very interesting on this small scale, and I can only imagine how much more so it would be on a larger scale. I'm told by the manufacturer of Ceracolors that you can use this intermittently with regular encaustic paint too, so there's a lot of possibilities for use.
Here is the Ceracolors fluid wax medium. I've poured a little bit of it out on my palette here, and I wanted to show you what it does to ultramarine blue or any of the colors. Here's a bit of the color and about the same amount of medium. Mixing them together, it gets Really fluid, lightens a little bit, very easy to work. Still has some dimension. Here's a second medium that Ceracolors offers. It's a paste wax medium. I'm going to put a little bit of it out here and mix it with the ultramarine blue. Got about equal parts here. The paste wax is really good for impasto, thicker brush strokes, and it helps if you want to melt the paint and use heat for different techniques. You can see it's much thicker than the fluid medium. It likes to sit up and form peaks. Using a bristle, it remains quite thick. I've set up a test panel here with just some yellow ochre, white, and black so that I can show you how the paint looks full strength, diluted with water, cut 50-50 with white, and a couple of the mediums here. So this one is just the full strength ultramarine blue. You can see it dries really quickly. I'd say another 10 seconds and it'll be pretty well dried. This next one is ultramarine blue cut with some water. You can make water glazes as thin and transparent as you desire. This next one is mixed with the fluid wax medium. It looks very similar to cutting it down with water, but it has a little bit more body, and it's useful if you want to do heat techniques to mix it with the fluid wax medium rather than water, as you'll have a higher wax content. This one here is the impasto wax paste. Very thick. Very opaque. And this last one is cut 50% with titanium white. It has a lot of opacity, but it's not going to be as opaque as, say, titanium white in oil. It's always going to have a little bit of transparency, so that's something good to remember when working with Ceracolors. Here's my test panel. It has been drying for about 2 minutes. You can see the texture of the thick impasto stroke and also how matte it dries. One of the beautiful things about wax is how matte it will dry. Another cool thing about Ceracolors is that even after the paint is dry, you can take a brush wet with water and gently scrub it, and you can reactivate your paint pretty easily. This is great if you wanted to take down a mistake or just try some interesting techniques. Another really great thing about the wax is that if you take your fingernail or a scraping tool, I have here a dental tool, you can scrape into the wax and go down to a deeper layer. It's very soft. I can do that with my fingernail. and usually after you heat set it, you won't be able to wet it as easily, but as far as I can tell, you can still do that if you scrub hard enough. Here's a quick tip. Because Ceracolors dries as the water evaporates, you're going to want to keep a little spray bottle around, just filled with water, and spray down your palette every now and again like you would with acrylic to keep the paints from drying too fast. And also, Natural Pigments sells a retarder additive that you can add a few drops to each pile of paint and keep it from drying up quite so fast. One more great thing about using Ceracolors is because it is a wax paint, you can do anything delightful with wax, like buffing it and polishing it. On this side we have just how it dries, very matte and flat. And then on the top side of this panel, I've already gone ahead and polished it a little bit with a soft cloth, and you can see it really gets a nice waxy sheen to it. And that was probably about 45 seconds of polishing.